The air was thick with smoke and dust after the long battle. The sun was low on the horizon, turning the broken field into shades of orange and gray. Ethan Cole moved carefully between damaged machines and burned-out vehicles. The smell of metal and scorched earth filled the air. He was a repair worker for the Human Defense Forces, and his job was to look for anything that could still be fixed. Ethan was not a soldier. He wore no shining armor, only a worn jacket covered in grease stains. What he carried was not a weapon, but a small repair kit and a pack of tools strapped to his belt. While others fought for glory, Ethan worked in silence, bringing broken machines back to life. To him, repairing was like breathing steady, simple, necessary. He reached the center of the field, where a fallen warsuit lay half-buried under rubble. It was unlike any armor he had ever seen. The design was smooth and elegant, built with precision far beyond anything his team owned. The silver plating still gleamed faintly in the fading light. For a moment he just stared at it, wondering what kind of person could have worn such a suit. With a grunt, Ethan knelt down and began clearing away the debris. As he worked, something moved inside the armor. He froze. Through the cracked face shield, a pair of eyes opened slowly. They were a deep green, sharp yet calm. The face within the helmet was human pale, dust-streaked, marked with soot, but undeniably alive. Ethan almost dropped his wrench. "You can talk, right?" he asked carefully. Her voice was weak at first but steady. "Yes. Who are you?" "Ethan Cole," he said. "Field repair mechanic. You're lucky I found you before the cleanup teams did." She gave a faint smile. "Lucky, yes. This armor. It took the last of our energy cells to keep me breathing." Ethan quickly knelt beside her, pulling open the damaged chest plates with gentle precision. He could see the network of circuits, power lines, and fiber cables inside. This was not ordinary human tech. This alloy. "It looks centuries ahead of us," he said softly. The woman nodded. "You are seeing the last design built for the Royal Guard, and I am its final bearer." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean I am Arya?" she said before he could finish. "Queen of the Western Commonwealth." He blinked, uncertain whether he should bow, salute, or simply stay quiet. Queen lying wounded in the dirt, with half her armor burned through, was not something he knew how to handle. "I thought the royal lines were gone," he finally said. "So did our enemies," she replied, closing her eyes briefly. "But I am still here. If this armor can be restored, I can still lead." For a moment, there was nothing but the wind moving through the debris. Ethan looked at her face, pale but proud, her jaw set with quiet determination. He felt something stir in his chest, a strange mix of respect and curiosity. He wanted to fix that armor not just because it was broken, but because it meant something. It carried purpose. "All right," he said, pulling a small welding torch from his belt. "Let's see what we can save." Arya tried to sit up, but her body trembled with pain. Ethan quickly helped her by adjusting the armor's support joints. He noted the way the inner layers connected directly to muscle sensors. It was not just a shell-eat, it was a living extension of the person inside. As he worked, the sound of battle faded completely. The sky turned darker, filled with quiet stars. The fires in the distance flickered out one by one. At last, she spoke again. "Why do you help me, Ethan Cole? You do not even know me." He smiled slightly while adjusting a power coupler. "I fix broken things. That's what I do." "That is a good reason," she said softly. "In war, few people care to repair anything. They only wish to destroy." Her words made him stop for a moment. She was right. Maybe that was why he had chosen this work, to build instead of break, to protect instead of take. After another hour, Arya's breathing steadied. Ethan managed to reactivate one power node. A faint glow returned to the armor's core, casting a blue light on their faces. She looked at the small light flickering in the center of her chest plate. "It lives again," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. "But it's a start." He looked up, meeting her gaze once more. The connection that flickered between them was quiet but strong, two strangers bound by survival, by work, by something that neither quite understood yet. In that broken valley, surrounded by ruins, Ethan Cole did not realize that this simple act of repair would soon change the path of both their lives. For now, it was only the mechanic and the warrior and the dim, hopeful hum of metal coming back to life. Ethan Cole worked through the long night inside the workshop of the great warship Hylian Dawn. The place was noisy and alive with the sound of tools.
Ow.
Sparks flew from one end of the room to the other as workers hammered plates and sealed engines. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and burning metal. Yet in a small corner of the bay it was quiet. That was where Ethan worked on the broken armor of Queen Arya. The armor lay open on a large work table, glowing faintly from the power cells he had reconnected. Each piece was shaped with purpose, every line designed not only to protect but to command. Ethan had seen many battlesuits, but nothing like this one. The alloy shimmered like liquid silver. When light touched it, it reflected rainbow colors along the edges. Ethan ran his hands over the metal corners carefully, searching for cracks. Every so often, he would look toward the door, expecting officers or guards to come and take over the job. No one came. Somehow the Queen had chosen him, a quiet mechanic from a small town, to fix her armor. He did not know why, but he was not foolish enough to refuse. Arya entered the workshop quietly. She was no longer in armor, but wore a simple gray uniform. Her dark hair was tied back, her face pale, yet strong. Ethan rose at once, but she waved for him to stay seated. "See, you've made progress," she said in a calm voice. "Some," he said. "The main power core is stable, but 2 energy lines are ruined. I might have to rebuild them from standard parts." "That is fine," she said. "If it holds, it holds." She walked slowly around the table, studying the armor as if it were a living being. Then she looked at Ethan. "How long have you served on this ship?" 2 years, he said. "Before that?" "I fixed farming drones in my hometown, and yet you handle Royal Protector armor as though it were nothing," Arya said with a faint half-smile. He felt his face grow warm. "Ma'am, machines all speak the same way if you listen closely enough." "What do they say to you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "They say they want to work again," he answered. "They just need someone patient enough to understand what's broken." Her eyes softened. "That is the same thing people need, Ethan." Her words caught him off guard. Did not expect the Queen to talk like that. She did not sound like someone who ruled nations, but like someone who remembered how to care for small things. The ship shook slightly as a distant explosion rumbled. Arya turned her gaze toward the sound. "The war is growing worse," she said. "The Council tells the people we are winning, but they hide the truth. We are losing ground every week." Ethan glanced at her armor, the once perfect panels now scorched from battle. "Then we need to keep you standing," he said, "'cause people need someone to believe in." She looked at him with quiet surprise. "You speak like a soldier." He shook his head. "I speak like a mechanic who fixes what people break." A faint smile returned to her lips. She stepped closer to the table and touched one section of the armor. "This suit has protected my life many times. Without it, I am only a woman. But with your hands, Ethan Cole, you make the impossible possible." Her words made his chest tighten, focused hard on the work instead of her eyes. The light from the power core flickered across both their faces, painting them blue and gold. "Hold this panel in place," he said, passing her a piece of alloy. She obeyed, pressing it down while he secured the bolts. Their hands brushed for a second. The movement was small, but enough to make both of them pause. Ethan quickly looked away and tightened the seal. Arya's eyes lingered on him for a moment, thoughtful but unreadable. Hours passed. Ethan stayed at work, fixing circuits, testing power lines, cleaning each small piece until it gleamed. Arya stayed near, silent most of the time, but sometimes she handed him tools or wiped dust from his hands. Outside, the roar of engines and voices spread through the corridors, yet inside this small corner it felt peaceful. When at last he reconnected the main node, a soft hum filled the air. The lines of the armor lit up, one by one, like veins waking under the skin. Energy pulsed through the suit in steady rhythm. Ethan smiled for the first time in many hours. "She's alive again." Arya stepped forward and looked at the glowing plates. "No," she said softly. "You brought her back to life." Ethan turned to her, but before he could speak, another tremor ran through the floor. The lights flickered. A voice echoed from the hallway, shouting for battle readiness. Ethan's heart jumped. "Another attack?" "Yes," Arya said, her tone changing instantly to command. They have found us again. She glanced at the armor and then back at him. Can it hold? He nodded firmly. It will. Her eyes met his, calm and strong. Then I will fight again, thanks to you. She lifted one piece of the armor and began connecting it in rhythm with the hum of the engines above. Ethan watched in silence as she once again became the warrior he had found on the battlefield. As the warship shook around them, Ethan realized he had become part of something far greater than his quiet life of repairs. He was no longer just fixing a machine. He was rebuilding the hope of an entire people. The battle alarms echoed through the ship. The deep red lights flashed along the walls and the sound of boots running shook the floor. Ethan Cole stood beside the work table, holding the final piece of the armor in his hands. He tried to calm his heart, though it was beating faster than the engines above them. Queen Arya stood tall in her partly restored armor. The silver plates gleamed faintly, even under the warning lights. She looked every inch a leader, though Ethan could see the faint tremor in her right hand. She'd been wounded before the armor failed earlier that day, and now, even standing seemed to cost her strength. Queen Arya, Ethan said quietly, you should still be resting. She laughed softly, though her smile was tired. A queen does not rest when her people fight. He looked at her for a moment. There was no fear in her eyes, only patience and power. Ethan began to fit the last shoulder guard into place. His fingers were steady, though. He could feel the heat of the armor under his skin. It was alive in some strange way, humming faintly as if it breathed along with her. You are sure it will hold? She asked. It will hold, he said simply. I rebuilt its core twice. It listens to you again. She nodded once, and we finish it together. When he placed the last lock into the joint near her neck, his hand brushed her skin. The touch was brief and quiet, yet something sparked there, not just in the metal, but in both of them. The pulse of the armor jumped louder for a heartbeat, then settled again. Arya looked at him sharply. For a second, time seemed to stop. The workshop noise faded away, leaving only the faint rhythm of her suit's core between them. You felt it too, didn't you? She asked softly. Ethan swallowed hard. It's just the current settling. It happens sometimes when the flow meets the sensors. She gave a small smile. Perhaps, she said. Or perhaps the armor remembers who healed it. He looked away, not trusting himself to answer. But his chest felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with electricity. Outside, the ship's guns fired again, shaking the deck. Over the com, voices shouted, orders. Ethan listened as one officer said that enemy forces were boarding near the lower hangars. They are inside the ship, Arya said quickly, already reaching for her helmet. Then you cannot go alone, Ethan said. You barely recovered. I have my armor now, she said firmly. It is enough. He hesitated. Then let me go with you. She stared at him. You're a mechanic, not a soldier. He tightened one of the straps on his tool belt. And that armor is my work. If it breaks again, you will need me. There was silence for a moment. Then she nodded. Very well. Stay close to me. They moved out together. The corridors of the Hellion dawn were filled with the echo of gunfire and tension. Shadows flickered as sparks fell from damaged lights. Soldiers ran past them, saluting the queen as they passed. Some stared at Ethan, wondering why a mechanic walked beside her, but none dared to question it. As they reached the lower decks, the noise grew louder. Doors hissed open and shut. The smell of smoke filled the air. Ethan gripped his repair wrench tightly, though it was hardly a weapon. Arya walked forward without fear, her armor glowing faintly in the darkness. When they reached the hangar, the fight was already raging. Soldiers fired at dark shapes moving between broken ships. The air shimmered with energy bolts. But when Arya stepped forward, the scene shifted. Her presence was like sunlight cutting through storm clouds. Hold the line, she shouted. Her voice carried across the hangar. Every soldier who heard it straightened and fired with renewed courage. Ethan stayed behind a crate, fixing a damaged power cable that cut off part of the light grid. Sparks flew as he worked. When the line came live again, the lights flared across the hangar, and the defending soldiers cheered. Arya fought like a storm given form. Every strike of her blade cut through the smoke with bright arcs of light. Ethan had never seen anyone move like her. Her restored armor shimmered with strength and grace. Yet even in the chaos, She turned once to make sure he was safe. By the end of the fight, the floor was littered with wreckage and burning metal. The last of the enemy fled. Soldiers shouted in victory. Arya lowered her blade, breathing hard. Ethan ran toward her, partly in relief, partly in fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She took off her helmet slowly. Her hair fell loose, her face pale, but her eyes shone bright. "No," she said softly. "Your repairs held." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than you know, Ethan Cole. You are not just a mechanic. You're the reason I could stand again." He looked at her, unsure what to say. The warmth of her touch matched the hum from the armor. For a moment, the noise of the hangar faded, and there was only her gaze, calm, powerful, and strangely kind. He wanted to tell her that he had only done his job, that fixing broken things was what he always did. But somehow the words stayed in his throat. Queen Arya smiled faintly, still holding his shoulder. "Do not lose that fire," she said. "The world needs more hands that fix instead of destroy." And before he could speak again, she walked past him, the light of her armor reflecting off the walls like quiet fire. Ethan stood there, feeling the echo of her words settle deep inside him, knowing that something far greater than duty had begun to awaken within his heart. The sun rose slowly over the quiet world below as the warship Helion Dawn floated in orbit, scarred but unbroken after the long night. Inside, Ethan Cole worked once again in the workshop, though his hands trembled from exhaustion. The battle in the hangar had ended only hours ago, and the memory still lived fresh in his mind. The fire, the shouting, Queen Arya walking through the smoke like the heart of the storm, it all felt unreal now that the warship was calm again. He had thought of resting, maybe even sleeping for a few hours, but he could not. The sight of her armor, now streaked with fresh burn marks, pulled him back to his tools. The silver plates were scratched and darkened, yet still beautiful. He began polishing the surface, working quietly, letting the slow rhythm calm his mind. He did not notice Arya enter until her reflection appeared on the smooth metal. She had changed from her battle armor into a plain jacket, though her posture still carried the strength of command. "You are still here," she said softly. Ethan looked up. "The armor needs more repair. Some of the joints burned during the fight." Her smile was faint but warm. "You work harder than any soldier I have seen." He shrugged. "The war does not stop for tired hands." She walked closer, resting her hand on the table beside the half-mended armor. "You risked your life in that hangar," she said. "You were not trained for battle, yet you stayed." "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I could not leave you out there alone. Because this armor is my work. If I build something, I stand by it." She studied him for a long moment. "You speak like someone who understands duty better than most generals." He gave a small laugh. "I am no hero. Heroes never think they are," she replied. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of the ship surrounded them like a quiet heartbeat. Ethan continued cleaning one of the plates, his fingers moving in slow circles. He did not see how Arya's eyes watched him, calm but thoughtful, as if she were trying to understand something that words could not explain. Finally she said, "When we return to the capital, you will be rewarded for your service." He shook his head quickly. "I did not do it for a reward." "That is why you deserve one," she said. He smiled a little, but kept working. "Just let me fix this armor right, that'll be enough." Arya moved closer. The faint scent of metal and smoke mixed with the soft perfume from her hair. When she leaned over to inspect a damaged section, their shoulders brushed. The touch was gentle and passing, but it sent a strange warmth through Ethan, the same feeling he had when he first adjusted the armor on her shoulder. "You repaired the outer layer," she said quietly, "but there is another fracture beneath." "Can you feel it?" He reached for the inner line she pointed to, brushing her hand as he traced the metal line across the chest plate. The hum of the power core shifted slightly under his fingers, as if it recognized him again. "Yes," he said, awareness filling his voice. "It is faint but real." "Just there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Their hands worked together, both focused, both silent. They moved with rhythm and understanding, neither needing to speak much. Each time their fingers met, the quiet between them grew stronger, like something deep and unspoken stretching across the room. When at last they finished, the armor gave a steady low pulse. A thin line of light ran along its surface, steady and alive. "It breathes again," she said. Ethan nodded. "What do we?" Her eyes lifted to meet his, and in that single look there was no commander, no queen, no servant. only to people who had seen too much war and found peace in the same space, for the same reason. Then the intercom crackled with the captain's voice. All crew to command deck. Incoming orders from high command. Arya straightened, her calm strength returning at once. They will want a counterattack, she said. They always do. They might, Ethan said, closing his tools. But they should give us time to rebuild. Time is a gift we are rarely given, she answered. Ethan followed her through the corridors to the command deck. Officers snapped to attention as she entered. Everyone went silent when she raised a hand. Information screens glowed around the room, showing the map of the galaxy scattered with red and green symbols. One officer spoke nervously. Your Majesty, the Council requests immediate deployment to Sector 12. Enemy fleets are regrouping. They expect your command. Arya stared at the screen but did not answer at once. Her voice when she finally spoke was low yet steady. We have just survived an attack that nearly cost this ship. My soldiers are wounded. They need rest, not orders for another sacrifice. The officer hesitated. Shall I tell the council you refuse? Arya breathed in slowly. Tell them I will fight, but on my own terms. After the meeting, she turned to Ethan outside the deck. When this next battle comes, there may be no return, she said. You do not have to stay on the ship. Ethan shook his head. I go where my work is needed. She looked at him and smiled quietly. Then stay close to me, as the lights of the ship dimmed for battle readiness once more. Ethan realized the bond between them had grown into something neither title nor war could change. It was not written in duty or command. It was born in silence and touch. In the simple act of repairing what was broken and finding strength together in the light that returned. The night before the final battle, the warship Hellion Dawn drifted silently in the outer orbit of a cold world. Lights glowed softly along its surface, and the stars reflected like scattered glass in the dark sky beyond. Inside, the air was filled with quiet tension. Soldiers prepared their weapons, mechanics checked the engines. And every voice carried the same unspoken question: would they survive the next day? Ethan Cole sat alone in the small corner of the hangar, sharpening his tools. Had already run every test on Queen Arya's armor. Everything worked perfectly, yet he kept checking again and again. The armor had become more than metal and wires to him. It felt like a part of her, and somehow a part of himself too. Arya entered the hangar without her guards. She moved with calm grace, her face steady, though Ethan could see the weight of tomorrow in her eyes. Her armor stood nearby, gleaming faintly under the overhead lights. You should rest, Ethan said. The next battle will be hard. I could say the same to you, she replied, walking closer. You have not slept since the last fight. He gave a small smile. Machines never sleep. They wait. She looked at the armor thoughtfully. Do you think it will hold? He nodded. It has to. For a moment there was only silence between them. The distant sound of engines hummed through the floor. Ethan, she said softly, when this war ends, what will you do? He looked down at his hands. I don't know. Maybe I'll go home and fix small machines again. Simple work. Calm work. And if there is no home left? She asked quietly. He looked up at her. Then I'll build one. She smiled faintly. You always know how to fix things, even in your words. He looked at her, uncertain what to say. Everything he wanted to tell her rested behind his lips, heavy and unspoken. That she had changed him. That she had turned repair into something holy. That her presence made this broken world seem worth saving again. When the alert sounded across the ship, both of them turned their heads. The battle was coming. The Hellion Dawn began to move, its engines roaring as bright light flared beyond the windows. Arya walked to the armor and began to put it on piece by piece. Ethan helped her, as he had done before, tightening the seals, locking the plates, connecting the power lines. Each sound of metal fitting into place echoed through the hangar. When he placed the final piece at her shoulder, his hand lingered for a moment longer than it should have. Arya turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. There it is again, she said softly. That charge in the air when you touched the armor. He tried to smile. Maybe it's only static. Maybe, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Or maybe it is something else. He could not answer. There were no words big enough to describe what he felt. The ship trembled violently as the first strike hit. Red alarm lights flashed. Over the cum, voices shouted orders. Ethan followed Arya through the corridors toward the command deck. Soldiers stood aside as she passed. Her voice carried over the panic. Hold formation. Keep faith. This fight will end with us still standing. When she stepped onto the command bridge, the view outside was filled with blazing light. Enemy vessels swarmed across the darkness. The Hellion dawn shook again and again as bright explosions lit the void. Ethan worked on the control panels, repairing circuits that overloaded under the strain of battle. Sparks flew around his hands, and smoke filled the air. Arya stood at the front, her armor glowing silver blue, giving commands with calm authority. The hours passed like a storm. Their ship burned, but it did not fall. Every time a system broke, Ethan was there, fixing it, bringing it back to life. Every time soldiers faltered, Arya's voice steadied them. Together, they turned the tide of the fight. At last, the final enemy ship broke apart in the distance. The silence that followed was unreal. The stars slowly cleared of fire. The Hellion dawn floated in peace again, scarred but victorious. Ethan sank to the floor, his arms shaking. Oil covered his hands. He breathed heavily, too tired even to speak. Then he saw her walking toward him. Arya removed her helmet, letting out a long, slow breath. "It is done," she said. Ethan nodded weakly. "You won." She looked around the bridge where flickering lights still glowed. "No," she said quietly. "We won." She crouched down beside him and lifted his chin gently with her hand. "You repaired more than just armor, Ethan. You repaired faith. In me, in all of us." He tried to laugh, but his throat closed. "I only fixed what was broken." She smiled warmly. "And that is the greatest kind of victory." They sat together in the silence that followed. The noise of war had faded, replaced by a soft hum from the ship's heart. Outside the window, the stars shone brighter than before, clean and sharp against the black. Arya turned to him, her eyes reflecting those stars. "When we return home, there will be rebuilding to do. New cities, new lives. I will need builders more than fighters." Ethan looked at her and felt something deep settle inside him, something quiet, strong, and full of peace. "Then I will build," he said simply. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her fingers were warm through his rough, work-stained gloves. "Then we will build together," she said. And as the great ship turned slowly toward the light of the sunrise over the world below, Ethan Cole realized that what began as a simple repair had become something far greater. In fixing her armor, he had found a reason to keep going. The war was over, but the story of renewal had just begun.